The restaurant went silent. The billionaire's hand froze mid-air, the steak knife glinting under the chandelier. Her eyes locked on the folded slip of paper resting on the silver tray. A note from the waitress. She opened it slowly, expecting something trivial. But when she read the words, the color drained from her face. Her jaw tightened. And then, to everyone's shock, she pushed back her chair and stood up so fast the table rattled. What could a simple waitress possibly write that would shake a woman who thought she owned the world? Before we dive in, make sure you subscribe. We bring you stories like this every week, stories where the quietest voices echo the loudest lessons. Because sometimes the people you overlook are the very ones holding the key to your downfall. The evening was supposed to be flawless. A five-star banquet in one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. Soft violin music played. The air itself seemed expensive. And at the head of the private dining room sat Elena Watanabe, a billionaire CEO known for her sharp tongue, business strategies as cold as steel, and a reputation for humiliating anyone she deemed beneath her. Investors, executives, even waitstaff, no one was safe from her cutting remarks. That night she arrived with her entourage, wealthy board members, lawyers, and bankers, all men in their 50s and 60s, dressed in dark, tailored suits. Their laughter was loud, their arrogance thicker than the wine they ordered. Among the staff, no one wanted to serve that table. They all knew how Elena treated waiters. Snapping fingers, rolling eyes, demanding impossible things. But fate chose Amara Lewis, a 25-year-old waitress with curly dark brown hair tied neatly back, her red and black uniform freshly ironed despite being slightly worn. Amara wasn't used to speaking up. Life had taught her to keep her head down. She worked long shifts to pay for night classes, balancing plates in the day and studying business administration at night. To the world, she was invisible. But that evening, something in her heart whispered, "Don't be afraid." As Amara approached, Elena barely looked up from her glass of wine. Finally, Elena sighed, as if her presence was a nuisance. "Bring me the steak, medium rare, and do try not to mess it up. I don't have time for incompetence." Her words sliced through the air. Some of the men chuckled. Amara's cheeks flushed hot, but she kept her composure. She nodded politely, jotting down the order. When she turned to leave, she heard Elena's voice again, sharp, mocking. "You know, sometimes I wonder why they let just anyone work in fine dining these days. Standards used to mean something." The laughter that followed echoed in Amara's ears. She gripped her notepad tight. Part of her wanted to cry. Another part, the stronger part, whispered again, "Don't be afraid." In the kitchen, Amara's hands shook as she prepared the order. She thought of her long nights studying, the sacrifices her mother made to raise her, and the dream that one day she'd sit at tables like this, not as staff, but as a leader. She thought of Elena, powerful and cruel, blind to the possibility that someone like her, a waitress, a young black woman from a modest neighborhood, could rise beyond the role she was boxed into. That's when Amara made a decision. She grabbed a small piece of paper and wrote something with quick, determined strokes. She folded it once, twice, and slipped it onto the silver tray beside the steak. Moments later, she carried it back to the private dining room, her posture tall, her eyes calm. Amara placed the tray gently in front of Elena. "Your steak, ma'am," she said softly. Elena, barely acknowledging her, reached for her knife. That's when she noticed the folded slip of paper. Her brow furrowed. Slowly she picked it up, unfolded it, and read the words. The room shifted. Laughter died. The investors glanced at each other, confused. Elena's face turned pale. She gripped the paper tighter, her breathing unsteady. Then in an instant, she shoved back her chair so abruptly the glasses rattled. The entire room froze. "Who gave me this?" she demanded, her voice colder than ice. Amara stood silently, her eyes locked on Elena's. The men leaned in, curious. Elena's hand trembled slightly, something no one had ever seen from her. For the first time, the predator looked cornered. She glanced at Amara, then back at the paper, as if the note had revealed something far too dangerous to ignore. But what could possibly be written that would strip power from a billionaire in front of her entire empire? One of the investors asked cautiously, "Elena, is something wrong?" Her lips parted, but no sound came. She folded the note quickly, slipping it into her purse as though hiding evidence. All eyes were on her now, and for the first time she wasn't in control of the room. And that was the moment the tables began to turn. The billionaire who had mocked everyone else was suddenly the one looking exposed. But what exactly did Amara write on that note? Why did it leave a woman as powerful as Elena rattled to her very core? Justice was stirring in that room, but this was only the beginning.
The slip of paper burned like fire in Elena Watanabe's hand. Her fingers clenched it so tightly the edges crumpled. She was used to controlling boardrooms, bending competitors to her will, silencing critics with money and power. But one waitress, with one note, had managed to strip the confidence from her face. What could Amara have written that no one else dared to say? And why did it matter so much? The table of investors shifted uncomfortably. Their meal no longer tasted of luxury. It tasted of unease. "Elena," one of them pressed cautiously, "is there a problem?" Elena forced a tight smile. "Of course not. Just an unnecessary distraction." She folded the note quickly and slipped it into her clutch bag. But her voice betrayed her. It trembled, just enough for everyone to notice. And across the room, Amara stood tall. She didn't shrink back. She didn't apologize. She simply kept her eyes steady, her expression calm, the picture of quiet courage. The truth was, the note contained only a few short sentences, but those sentences carried a weight Elena couldn't ignore. Amara had written, "I know what you did to my mother. She was one of your employees, fired without warning after 20 years of loyalty, just before her pension. That decision cost her everything, and tonight you'll hear her story again. This time, not in silence." The moment Elena read those words, her mind raced back years. She remembered a case buried under stacks of paperwork. A woman dismissed right before retirement. No compensation, no warning. To Elena, it was just business. To Amara's family, it was devastation. And now, standing in her uniform with nothing but courage, that daughter was staring her down. For the first time in years, Elena felt something foreign. Fear. The investors began to whisper among themselves. "Strange, she's rattled. She never gets rattled. What did that girl give her?" Their eyes darted between the billionaire and the waitress. The power in the room shifted, subtly but unmistakably. Elena's empire had always rested on perception, control, image, and in front of her most powerful allies, she was losing it. Finally, Elena snapped. "You," she hissed, pointing directly at Amara. "What game are you playing?" The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the young waitress. Amara didn't flinch. She stepped forward, her voice soft but clear. "No game. Just the truth." And with those 4 words, the banquet hall, once filled with arrogance and laughter, became a stage of judgment. The investors leaned in. The staff froze mid-step. And Elena Watanabe, billionaire and untouchable, found herself standing in the spotlight of judgment. The note was only the beginning. Amara had lit a fuse that would shake the entire foundation of Elena's empire. But how far would she take it? Would the world finally hear her voice? For years, Amara's family lived in silence. Her mother's story was buried, forgotten, dismissed by the powerful hands that had erased it. But on this night, in front of the very people who believed themselves untouchable, the silence cracked open. And it was a waitress, not a CEO, who dared to speak. Amara took a deep breath. Her heart pounded so loudly it felt like the entire hall could hear it. But she stepped forward, her voice steady. "My mother gave 20 years to your company, Miss Watanabe. She sacrificed her health, her time, her dreams. And when she was just months away from retirement, you let her go. No warning, no pension, nothing." Gasps rippled across the room. The investors looked at one another, disbelief etched into their faces. Elena's face hardened, but her eyes betrayed her. For the first time, she looked cornered. Mr. Hawthorne, one of the wealthiest men at the table, leaned forward, his sharp voice cutting through the tension. "Is this true, Elena?" She scoffed, attempting control. "This is ridiculous. She's just a girl, a waitress looking for attention." But her voice lacked conviction, and that alone was enough for doubt to spread like wildfire. Amara didn't back down. She held up a faded folder she had carried with her all night. "These," she said firmly, "are the documents. Proof of my mother's dismissal, proof of her service, proof of how she was discarded like nothing." She placed the folder on the polished table. For a moment, no one moved. The once comfortable investors sat in uneasy silence, their wealth and power unable to shield them from the uncomfortable truth staring them in the face. Elena tried to laugh it off, but the sound was hollow. "You think this will ruin me? I built an empire. 1,000 people would beg for what she had. Business is business. Sentiment doesn't keep doors open." But the more she spoke, the clearer it became. Her words were cold, heartless, and every syllable eroded her reputation further. One investor muttered under his breath, loud enough for others to hear, "This isn't the Elena we trusted." Amara's voice rose, filled with passion now. "You call it business. I call it cruelty. And tonight, I won't stay silent anymore. My mother may never get her years back, but I will not let you erase her story. Not again." Her words echoed through the hall. And something remarkable happened. The staff, waiters, cleaners, cooks, who had always moved like shadows in the background, paused. They looked up. For the first time, they saw one of their own standing tall. In that single moment, the power shifted. A billionaire tried to silence the truth, but a young waitress refused to bow. The investors had come for a meal. Instead, they witnessed a reckoning. But this was only the beginning, because what Amara had revealed tonight was just a fraction of the storm that was about to break.
What began as a quiet dinner had transformed into a battleground of truth and power, and now all eyes were on Elena Watanabe, the billionaire who had once seemed untouchable, and the young waitress who dared to challenge her. Elena's face flushed red as she slammed her hand against the table. "Enough of this," she snapped. "You think anyone here cares about your sob story? You think they'll believe a waitress over me?" But her voice cracked, not with authority, but with panic. The investors exchanged glances. They didn't see a strong CEO anymore. They saw a woman unraveling, desperate to protect the empire she had built on silence. Mr. Hawthorne rose from his chair, his tone sharp and cutting. "Actually, Elena, I do believe her. And if there's one story like this, there are probably dozens more, maybe hundreds. This isn't just cruelty, it's liability." The others nodded, murmuring in agreement. One by one, their loyalty dissolved. For years, they had feared Elena's dominance. Tonight, they smelled weakness. Amara's hands trembled, but her voice carried steady through the hall. "You built your fortune by stepping on people like my mother, by silencing those without power. But power doesn't last forever. Truth does." The words struck like thunder. Even the staff, who had always been invisible, began to clap quietly. The sound grew, echoing across the hall, until the investors themselves joined in. Elena stood frozen, her empire collapsing, not from financial ruin, but from something far worse: exposure. For the first time in decades, the billionaire was not feared. She was pitied. And the young woman she had dismissed as just a waitress now stood at the center of the room, commanding more respect than Elena ever could. This was the cruel irony. Elena had spent her life silencing voices like Amara's, but in the end, it was Amara's voice that silenced her. The room, once dominated by wealth and arrogance, now belonged to the girl no one thought mattered. The underdog had turned the tables. As the applause faded, Amara stepped back, tears welling in her eyes. She had spoken for her mother. She had spoken for all the forgotten faces. But just as she thought it was over, Elena leaned in close and whispered, her voice trembling with fury. "You think you've won? You've only made yourself a target. You don't know the enemies you've just created." Amara froze. Her victory was real, but so was the danger. The billionaire had been humbled. Justice had been served. But now a bigger storm was on the horizon. Because when powerful people fall, they don't fall quietly. And Amara's fight had only just begun. So the question is, will the truth set her free, or will it cost her everything? Drop a comment and hit the subscribe button if you would like for us to continue with the story.